So, our last speaker before the panel discussion is Shannon Phillips. So, Shannon lives in Kingston, Ontario with her husband Dave, dog Bobby. She enjoys spending time with her family, friends, hiking outdoors, all things food, and a good strategy board game. She's a lifelong learner and someone with an educational background in social work. Shannon is interested in exploring ways to support patients, survivors in their personal journeys. At 37 years old, she survived 2 types of cancer. And Shannon has actually graciously volunteered to help redesign the My Gut Feeling website, which will launch at some point shortly in the year. We're working towards it. So please help me welcome Shannon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. My name is Shannon Phillips, and this is my support system, my husband, Dave. I just wanted to introduce the video that's just about to play. What I hope with making this video is I hope it's a beacon for someone else that might be going through a similar experience to myself. So, yeah, without further ado, I'll play the video. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I get to telling my story, I would just like to take a second to thank Teresa and Katie for helping put together this incredible event today. And a big thank you to all the volunteers involved. I would also like to personally thank Teresa and Katie for empowering me over these past few months. They entrusted me with full creative control over the My Gut Feeling website, and hopefully we will be able to launch that site shortly. My name is Shannon Phillips, and I was 32 years old when I was diagnosed with stage 3 aggressive breast cancer and then late stage stomach cancer. The last time I was in this auditorium was November 2019, and I had just completed my 25th and final round of abdominal radiation. It was one of the hardest times of my life. My body pain was at an all-time high, and I was experiencing retching fits when I would eat almost anything, and I had such little energy. But for some crazy reason, I told my mom I wanted to come to this, and my family made it happen. I wanted to be a part of a community that understood what I was going through, and I wanted to see the other side of this horrible disease. I wanted to meet Teresa. This was someone who could truly empathize with what I had been through. So, 5 years ago, when I was about to leave for a much anticipated trip to Iceland, my husband and I noticed a very large lump in my left breast that seemed to develop overnight. I was in the shower lathering up when I noticed that my breast was inflamed. I was dumbfounded, and I convinced myself that it was some sort of swelling and that it would simply go away. Over the trip, it began to ache, and towards the end of our time away, I began to prepare myself for the possibility that it might be cancer. I remember telling my husband, Dave, this after a very long hike, and him being the eternal optimist, said not to worry. After we returned home, though, I went to the doctor right away. After undergoing a biopsy of the tumor, they diagnosed it as triple-negative breast cancer. This reduced my options in terms of treatment significantly. This meant that chemotherapy was vital for shrinking the tumor before surgery. During this time and prior to starting chemo, I received numerous scans to determine the cancer and if it had spread to other parts of my body. I remember undergoing an MRI and a bone scan. All these things were so new to me at the time, and I felt so vulnerable. During one of these scans, a CT scan, they found something abnormal near my stomach. This was a devastating and shocking finding that I hadn't prepared for, the fact that the cancer may have spread to other organs. After undergoing multiple endoscopes and a PET scan, they were able to finally find the tumor. And then in the end, it was determined that the tumor was not connected to my breast cancer, and it was a different cancer altogether. This, oddly enough, felt reassuring because otherwise it had spread and possibly that it was incurable. So instead, I was diagnosed with 2 separate cancers. What happened next was a multi-year, multi-modality series of treatments, including multiple rounds of chemo and radiation, and multiple surgeries. It was excruciating, as you can imagine. Essentially, after barely recuperating from one treatment, I was on to the next with little or no recovery. And in some ways, I think I've blocked some of this trauma out over the years. My memories can be a little blank when it comes to certain things that I've been through. Shortly after going on medical leave from work, I began breast chemo in November of 2018, which was very successful. Breast chemo and chemo in general is a nerve-wracking experience in the sense that you have almost no idea about how you're going to react to the medication. Whenever I was put on a new set of meds, I reacted differently. For instance, during my first round, I lost my hair and I gained weight and I experienced sharp nerve pain in my legs. Then during my second round of chemo, I lost all remaining hair on my body, my eyelashes, my eyebrows, and I also experienced a different form of nerve pain in my legs. This time it was pulsing pain and numbness in my feet, knees, and hands, which made it very challenging to walk. After breast chemo came stomach chemo, all of which brought different side effects and complications. Neuropathy and nausea were the most difficult side effects to battle. I experienced pain and numbing in my joints from the neuropathy and uncontrollable nausea, which this did land me in the hospital on a number of occasions. Poor hydration also landed me in the emergency department, and afterwards I started to receive hydration at home on a regular basis. In hindsight, this should have been in place when I started chemo because dehydration seems to be a consistent experience and side effect. Chemo can be very unpredictable, and it's so important to surround yourself with knowledge and support. In addition to reaching out to family and friends, it's also helpful to take advantage of all the supports offered through the hospital and cancer centers, such as nutritionists, occupational therapists, counselors, and home care. My nutritionist was essential in helping me develop a realistic food plan. She would give me examples of small things to add to my meals that would increase calories, and she added digestive enzymes when I was not absorbing nutrients properly. My home care was also vital for supporting me at home with dressing changes, education, and emotional support when I needed it. She was pretty wonderful. After chemo came a month of surgeries. After an exploratory surgery of my underarm lymph nodes and abdomen, which was done partly by laparoscopic, then a breast lumpectomy, and finally a total gastrectomy. During the total gastrectomy, they also took out the rest of my lymph nodes in my left arm and inserted a feeding tube into my abdomen. Once I recovered from surgery, I went on to another. My total gastrectomy surgery had the longest recovery, and in many ways, I feel like I'm still recovering. I was in the hospital for over a week, and when I got home, I had to adapt to using assistive devices like bed rails and grab bars, as well as a temporary feeding tube. In the beginning, the feeding tube was a primary source of nutrition, but over time I was able to eat more and more different types of foods. I will stress that eating more varieties of foods took a very long time, and this is something that I still struggle with to this day. In the beginning, I ate mashed potatoes and oatmeal all the time. Even though I eat much more of a variety these days, I still fall back on these meals when I'm not feeling well, which is currently. Once I was barely recovered from major surgery, I started stomach chemo, the standard one known as FLOT, and then radiation sessions. Unfortunately, 3 rounds into chemo, I started to develop serious neuropathy issues in my knees. My knees felt numb and it was becoming more and more difficult to walk. Concerned that this side effect would be worse or even permanent, my doctor decided to cut back on the intensity of the chemo. Doing this made it more bearable to handle the side effects of the chemo, and the ability to walk improved over the coming weeks. After I had some time to recover from chemo, I began what at the time I had no idea would be the biggest treatment struggle, and this was abdominal radiation. In short, it beat me down completely, and I felt like it might do me in entirely. The experience left me battling nausea, weight loss, and pain. The nausea got better over time with increased hydration and medications that targeted the digestive issues. Unfortunately, the weight loss continued until I had to advocate with help from my nutritionist for a feeding tube. When the feeding tube was surgically put back in, I was down to 90 pounds and feeling faint most of the time. Daily tasks like showering would worry me because I thought I might faint. Having a feeding tube saved me. I was able to get my weight back up to a safe level, which was about 116 pounds, which meant I could do my daily tasks without feeling faint. The feeding tube did not come without its complications, though. It caused more pain and direct soreness around the tube site. The swelling was intense, and the friction caused almost constant pain and discomfort. I was also adjusting myself and sitting in specific ways to relieve the soreness all the time. Throughout all these treatments, there was a consistent side effect of pain. Pain was my nemesis, and we have a very complicated relationship. In the beginning, I was able to handle the pain without much assistance, but when I was going through abdominal radiation, the pain spiraled out of control. I reached out to alternative treatments like acupuncture, which would help me temporarily. I also tried to access counseling many times, and unfortunately, I fell through the cracks. And it took quite some time to receive counseling. While I was waiting, I started taking a low dose of hydromorphone for the physical pain that I was experiencing. To clarify, this medication had been prescribed to me since the very beginning when I had started breast cancer chemo. Over time, the dose and amount I was taking doubled as treatment for physical pain and also for my mental pain and struggles, which were not being addressed entirely by the healthcare team. I was experiencing anxiety, and when I reached out for help, I was not taken seriously, and there was no follow-up. I became dependent on opioids, and over time I increased my dose. I visited the emergency department a number of times because I had ran out of meds and I was going into withdrawal symptoms, which was agonizing. It is hard to put into words what withdrawal feels like. It is all-consuming and entirely debilitating. It took some trial and error, but with the assistance of my wonderful family doctor, I was able to keep to a gradual cutback plan. Tapering is, I believe, the medical term. At this point, I was finally connected with a psychologist and a pain team that assisted with the symptoms and side effects of cutting back on opioids. I just celebrated my 2-year sobriety, which is one of the proudest accomplishments of my life. Opioid dependence recovery got easier over time for me, but I will say it did not work the first time. I experienced relapse a number of times, and in the end, what finally worked for me was a combination of tapering and withdrawal symptom management. This symptom management depends upon the individual, and in my case, we had to address elevated anxiety and physical pain. Today, I am over 4 years cancer-free, and I am abundantly grateful for all the love and care that I have received along the way. Cancer is a hard and lonely uphill battle. I remember feeling alienated after my diagnosis. Suddenly, I was the sick person in the room. I had to watch all my loved ones feel helpless to save me. This battle doesn't end with being cancer-free, though. The ongoing effects that people experience after treatment can be significant and entirely life-altering. In my case, I continue to struggle with fatigue, digestive issues, and overall body aches and pains. I look to I like to look at my life simply these days. Good days involve chats with my mom and dad, and my 2 sisters, and board games with friends, and a long walk with my furry friend Bobby. Cancer will always be a part of me and be a part of who I am. I cannot escape what I've been through. I only hope that I can help someone who is navigating their own journey. Thank you.
Shannon, thank you so much for that touching story. Seriously, it takes so much courage to be able to share what you have shared today. I think the patients here, I mean, I see tears again in the audience because it's so relatable and it's such a hard journey, and stories like yours, they deserve to be shared. So thank you so much.